All right, we're live. And so our next speaker is the second of the Raphaels, Raphael Bouquet, and the title is Univalent Transport and Type Theoretic Infinity Categories. So please be disciplined with time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. All right, so I will present my work on univalent transport and type theoretic infinity categories. So first of all, what do I mean by univalent transport? And maybe this is something that could also be called external univalence. So this is some meta-theoretic and external counterpart to the univalence axiom that is more of an internal thing. For my statement of this, and this is something that is somewhat well known, if in type theory, we expect that whenever we have a type expression P of x that depends on a type variable x, and any equivalence between two types A and B, we can derive an equivalence between P of A and P of B. And we expect this to hold by induction over the structure of P, because we know that every type former in type theory usually respects equivalences. But while univalence implies univalent transport, the converse is not true. So we may have models of type theory that satisfy univalent transport, but also refute univalence. And if you think of parametricity instead of univalence, it's quite similar if you think of internal and external parametricity. Okay, so there has been some previous work on this topic, and in particular, I want to talk about two of them. The first of those is the homotopy theory of type theories by Kaplukin and Lumsdain. And in this work, they construct a left semi-modal structure over categories of models of type theory with identity types, sigma types, and optionally pi types. And this actually implies univalent transport for these type theories. Or alternatively, this can be seen as a definition of univalent transport. One of the main intended applications of this work was to properly state internal languages conjectures. Another work related to univalent transport is the marriage of univalence and parametricity by Tabarro, Tantar, and Sozo, in which they define some syntactic translation for a type theory that has univalence that combines univalence and parametricity in some way. And this can be seen in some sense as a proof of univalent transport for a type theory with univalence, but it has better computational properties than the direct proof. And in some cases, the terms that you obtain through this translation do not involve univalence. So for type theories without univalence, it says in some cases that we have univalent transport, but not in all cases. And some shared point by both of these pieces of work, and also that is also present in my work, is that this relies on some homotopical inverse diagram models. So I will go back to this later in the talk. So what are the new results and approaches that I want to present today? The main idea is that we can give a statement of univalent transport in the language of type theoretic infinity categories. So what happens is that some infinity categories are just naturally there when we think about this notion. So for instance, but then we have several ways to model this. So the left semi-modal structure that was in the work that I mentioned is one of these. But I think that instead it's this notion of type theoretic infinity category gives a simpler approach. So I will define type theoretic categories shortly. So something that should be proven is that this is equivalent with previous approaches, and I have proven one direction, but the other direction is still work in progress. And I will also briefly talk about applications and statements that are expressed in the same language. So these completeness results for type theoretic infinity categories are things that can also be expressed in this language of type theoretic infinity categories. and that's one of the fact that you have several statements that you can express in the same language is one of the nice things about this approach. And I think I also have proofs of that this property holds that are simply that are slightly simpler and more general than previous proofs. In particular, we only rely on single homotopical inverse diagram model instead of multiple ones in previous proofs. Okay, so what are type-theoretic categories? And we'll first look at type-theoretic one categories. So it is well known that we have that some type theories are internal languages for some classes of categories. So if we look at type theory with sigma types and equality types, it is the internal language of finitely complete one categories. If we add pi types, we get locally Cartesian closed one categories. Okay, just as a remark, I always include unit types in sigma types, and equality types are identity types with equality reflection. So this means that whenever we want to work with finitely complete one categories, you can choose to work with models of the corresponding type theory instead. And so that's what we do. For the semantics of type theory, we want to work with something that is in between finitely complete and locally Cartesian closed categories, namely Uemura's representable map one categories, which can be seen as a similar to locally Cartesian closed one categories, but in which we restrict dependent products to a subfamily of types or to a subclass of morphisms in the categorical setting. And then, so we need some elements of the semantics of type theory in a representable map one category, but with a type theoretic definition. So if we look at models of a type theory, at categorical models, so such as CWFs, they consist of a categorical part, so usually a category with a terminal object, and some additional structure that can be expressed in the internal language of a presheaf category. However, this only uses the fact that this presheaf category is a representable map one category. So we can generalize these models to models in any representable map one category. And this leads us to this definition of generalized model. Generalized model is itself a model of a type theory. It's a model of some two-level type theory with an outer layer and an inner layer. The outer layer corresponds to the structure of a representable map one category expressed in as a type theoretic one category. So this consists of a presheaf of outer types and then outer terms, and then these type theoretic structures, so sigma types, the restricted dependent products of representable map categories, and equality types, and all of the corresponding operations. So this is the outer layer. And then we also have the inner layer that corresponds to the structure of a model of our type theory T internally to the representable map one category. So this consists of well, types, terms, and operations. But now types and terms are not presheafs, but elements of the outer types and outer terms. So I use a red font in order to distinguish the things from the inner layer of this. So we have this generalized notion of model, and well, one thing that is nice is that it is itself models of a type theory, so we have syntax for it. So we can look at the category of models, and there is an initial object. Another thing we can do is change the type theoretic structures that are available in the outer layer. So we can remove the restriction on pi types, or we can omit equality types, and we get different syntactic models this way. Already, this is quite useful because this gives syntactic descriptions of objects that naturally occur when we want to work with type theories. For example, finitely generated models or finitely presented models. Okay, so now that we have seen type-theoretic 1 categories, let's look at infinity categories. But not much needs to be changed. We just replace the equality types that we had in the previous internal languages with identity types. And now the internal language equivalences are not so clear. Most of them are still conjecture. But for us, it does not really matter because we only work with the type-theoretic side of these equivalences. And then again, we have categories of modals, and we have syntactic modals for these the different variants of the two-level type theory that we obtain. And then, so let's focus on one of these two-level type theories. So the one that corresponds to representable map infinity category equipped with an internal model of T. So a model of this theory has outer sigma types, restricted pi types, and identity types, and then an internal model of T. Then we can notice that if we look at the inner types and terms, we have several ways to compare them. One that is given by the inner layer and one that is in the outer layer. In the inner layer, we have notions of equivalences and we have inner identity types. And in the outer layer, we have the identity types of the outer layer. So we have these two notions of sameness, and we have comparison maps between the two. So we have maps coeti and coetm that send reflexivity, so outer reflexivity, to either the inner reflexivity, inner identity equivalence, and to the inner reflexivity path. And then it is natural to ask for these comparison maps to be equivalences. And we say that a model of this type theory is univalent if this is satisfied. So this is some kind of thing that is commonly done. So the definition of univalent categories in homotopy type theory is the same idea. So we have arrived to this following some the intuition that we have some kind of infinity categories. But another way to reach this type theory is to think that this is the smallest extension of our base theory in which we have univalent transport. So we have freely added univalent transport to our theory in some sense. And we can check that indeed it satisfies our informal notion of univalent transport that was given on the first slide. If we have any family of types P from types, so yeah, that depends on the type, and any inner equivalence between two types A and B, we can use the inverse of the coeti map in order to get an outer equality between A and B. Then we get an outer equality between P of A and P of B. And using coeti again, we get an inner equivalence between P of A and P of B. And so our statements of univalent transport for the type theory T will use the fact that this model satisfies this property. So we say that a type theory satisfies univalent transport if this model is in some sense some conservative extension of another of these syntactic models of T. And more precisely, we ask for some morphism to be essentially surjective on outer terms. And if this is true, we can check that for the domain of this morphism, we again have the same property. So we can just take our P and our equivalence there, move using this functor to the codomain, use the fact that this satisfies univalent transport, and then use essential surjectivity to get back to the domain. Right, so this is our definition of univalent transport, and then you can show that it is equivalent to other conditions. So this theorem is still work in progress because I have proofs for the forward directions, and I've not yet worked on the other directions, but I believe all these conditions should be equivalent. So condition 2 is our definition. Condition 3 is the statement that uses left semi-modal structures. And condition 1 is the one that we would want to prove if you want to prove that a concrete type theory satisfies this property. Okay, so I won't give any elements of the proofs of that these conditions are equivalent. I will give some elements of the proof that the proofs of condition 1 for concrete type theories. But first, I want to discuss the test results that are related to this. And first, we can look at a theorem that was proven by Gretzer and Sterling. And this theorem is an adequacy theorem that compares representable map categories and locally Cartesian closed categories that are presented by the same data. If you have these categories, there is some canonical functor between them, and this functor is fully faithful. If we switch to the language of type theoretic categories, this functor corresponds to the map between these two models, and full faithfulness corresponds to surjectivity on outer terms. But then we have many additional syntactic models that you can consider that corresponds to, so we have all models in these diagrams and lots of morphisms between them. And it turns out that we can prove that all of the blue maps are always surjective on outer terms. So they all correspond to fully faithful functors between one categories. And the fact that this map on the bottom left is essentially surjective on outer terms was our definition of univalent transport. And when this holds, then we can prove that all of the other maps also are also essentially surjective on outer terms. So they correspond to fully faithful infinity functors between infinity categories. All right, and this is quite useful because essentially we prove that we can embed our type theory into more and more powerful languages in which it becomes simpler to prove things. Okay, and I will end by giving some elements of the proof that this condition 1 holds. And the idea is that we use some homotopical inverse diagram model as in previous work. So the core idea is that we have some model without identity types, and we want to define identity types. So how do we do this? We define identity types by induction on types. But then that's the idea, but making this precise is a bit tricky. And homotopical inverse diagram models are a way to deal with this. And there we notice that we actually need to consider a single homotopical inverse diagram model, the model of marked graphs, in which an object has a context of vertices, a context of edges between two vertices, and a context of marked edges over edges. So edges will be used to define identity types and transport, while marked edges will be used to define reflexivity and the computational rule for transport. And then, the theorem in this setting is that if we have a section of the projection for vertices, then we can use this to equip our category, our base model, with identity types. But they're unstable, so they're not stable under substitutions, and they do not satisfy a strict computation rule. But that's fine. And then if we want to apply this concretely, we apply this to the model that we want to extend with entity types. And the only thing that we have to do is to extend this Markov model with the structure of a model of our type theory. And then if we unfold the definitions, we see that this corresponds exactly to proving that everything in the type theory T preserves equivalences and equalities. So this can be done for concrete type theories. Okay, so there's some tricky details hidden there. One is that, so usually in homotopical inverse diagram models, we assume that we already start with identity types because we need some contractibility conditions. And but there we do not have identity types yet, so we kind of have a dependency loop. But it can be broken in some way by defining contractibility first, and then proving at the end that this notion of contractibility and the one for identity types coincide. Okay, we'll skip this. And yeah, one other thing is that so this model has unstable weak identity types, but actually using the local universe methods of Lubstein and Warren, we can prove that it has stable weak identity types. Okay, and I will conclude with some remarks. So the reason why I looked at this is that I plan to apply this to prove that extensions of type theories by additional definition equalities are conservative, and for this I need some of the completeness results that I mentioned. I also conjecture that in this diagram there we have things that correspond to locally Cartesian closed infinity categories, but I conjecture that we can move to type theories with additional structures or things that have more structures than locally Cartesian closed infinity categories. So for instance, we could extend the outer layer of these models to models of homotopy type theory or of cubical type theory. But this has to be very hard because this can be used to prove homotopic unicity for hot. So it is at least as hard as homotopic unicity for homotopy type theory. Okay, and I had another question there, but it was answered in some way by the talk of Ivan Cavallo earlier. Okay, so I will stop there.
All right, thanks a lot. Let's applaud in one way or another. And we'll open the floor to questions, and we have comfortable amounts of time for questions before we have to move to the next talk. So I'll wait for all the raised hands. You can also type it in the chat, and I'll read it. There are numerous options, so. Let's not be shy. So someone tells me that they've raised their hand and I can't see anything, which is confusing. Oh, there we go. I think it's just like a 5-minute delay between you ask a question and you actually can do that. So not a problem at all. Okay, Peter, you're on.
Hello. So very nice talk.
Hello.
Thank you. A bit of a technical question. I'd be interested to see what definition of contractibility you used, if you don't mind going into that.
Yeah. So actually it's quite simple. So the only thing is that we look at all closure conditions on contractibility that we have in the proof. We collect all of them in an inductive predicate. We use this. And at the end, we prove by induction that this implies contractibility for the usual definition.
Predicate in the type theory itself, or in the logical framework?
In presheaves over our model.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Anyone else wants to go live? Okay. According to our great software, there are no further raised hands. So, Raphael, thanks again. And we'll be looking forward to seeing the paper. So I think that concludes this talk, and we're going to comfortably move on to the next talk. So we'll see you all there.